the official Zoomcast of Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. He's an American guitar legend and musical director for The Conan O'Brien Show. Hear untold stories from Jimmy and his musical guests. They will talk music, its influence, culture, and future on The Green Room with Jimmy Vivino, with special guest Joe Bonamassa.
Yes, it is. Something going on in the green room. Something going on in the green room right now. Hey, welcome to the Green Room with Jimmy Vivino. That's me, in the green room. Tonight, my guest is my good friend for almost 30 years now. I've known him since he was a kid. He's a guitar legend. He's an entrepreneur. He's an all-around great guy, Joe Bonamassa. So hang in there with us. So I guess we're rolling, right? And you and I are old friends, man. I'm trying to remember. I think, I think it was 1992, which would make you. Would you be 17 already by 92? I'm trying to remember.
I would have been.
No, you would have been 15.
15, yeah.
15, yeah. And that would be at the guitar show.
Right.
We met at. You were 15. This is just when I had gotten the show.
Right.
So you know, I was kind of rolling around looking for stuff. You know, I'm like, I need some stuff, and I think I ran into you and your father, and I don't know how we. I think your father might have known who I was somehow, and then introduced me to you, and you were just a little kid, and you could play already. So I mean, you were 4 when you started.
I was 4 when I started. My dad, obviously, guitar player. My grandfather was a trumpet player. My great-grandfather was a trumpet player.
Yeah.
And my father, you know, being a product of the late 60s, you know, heard Cream and Mountain.
Yeah.
And was like, I'm not playing trumpet. So my grandfather tried to get me to start on the trumpet, and I just couldn't get anything out of it. I had the Louis Armstrong or the Dizzy Gillespie
cheeks.
Yeah. I couldn't get the technique down. And my dad just put a guitar in my hands, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it, wanting to play it.
Yeah.
And by the time I met you, that would have been the New York Guitar Show.
Yeah, right. The New York Guitar Show before the Five Towns shows. That was later.
Yes.
The New York Guitar Show. Right. Well, and there somewhere, I don't know who took that picture. There's a picture of me and Cesar Diaz, and I can't remember.
Jim Weeder.
Yeah, Weeder.
Ray Gomez.
And Ray Gomez, and then you're in the back in the doorway, like looking, like photobombing us.
It was I was photobombing before it was cool to photobomb.
You looked to be kind of like, how do I get into that club? You know?
Yeah, you have to understand, like being from upstate New York. You know, at that time, I'd already met BB and Buddy Guy.
Yeah, you had toured a little with
toured a little bit. I had my own band. I was actually had a development deal with EMI Records.
You were Smokin Joe.
You were Smokin Joe.
Yeah.
I was in this band Bloodline, but I was also helping my dad. Because I was living at home and in high school, and helped my dad out with the guitar shop and the guitar business, and so it was a very, very interesting time for me because I always wanted to go to New York, because at that time, as you know, that's where all the cats were. That's where the A-list players, you could, I remember those legendary gigs you used to do at Downtime on 30th Street. My dad would, drag me there, and not drag me there. I would drag him there, and he would drive us home. And it was you would see people off the road, at the height of their powers, and you'd run into all these people like yourself and Ray Gomez and Jim Weeder, and everybody was in New York working. Jeff Golub, rest in peace.
It's funny, Elliot Randall just sent me a picture from one of those shows of us playing together, and I forgot completely about that night. And I said, well, there were so many that came through the door, and we always they were welcome to the stage, you know?
Yeah.
I think if we let you up, though, we might have gotten in trouble. We might have got shut down by the,
Police.
Bureau of the Police. But anyway, I was a trumpet player.
Okay.
First, from when I was 9, I was a trumpet player. Until I was 23, I switched to guitar later. But I had always had a guitar around the house, like everyone, and a piano and all that other stuff. But I was a trumpet player. And the funny thing is, those same records that your father had, the Mountain records and the Cream, those made me not want to play trumpet anymore.
Yeah.
The same way, it was kind of, this is a dead end. You know, it's not Harry James now, it's Eric Clapton. So what were the first records you remember getting your hands on and listening to?
First record my father introduced me to was Just One Night, Eric Clapton. Yeah. I believe it came in 1980, and it was that picture with him he had Blackie, and he was sitting on, I believe it was on the stage of the Capitol Theater in Port Chester. It was like wood stage, and he had just played or wherever just before they set up, because there was no backline. And immediately, because sometimes I hear with my eyes, I immediately looked at the Strat with all the wear marks.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was the coolest thing. And I believe at the time I believe George Terry was still in the band, or maybe even Albert.
I think maybe Albert, maybe George. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it was. And then, Jamie Oldacker. Yeah. I think there was a time that Duck Dunn played in that band. It was like late 70s, early 80s. And I just remember hearing that sound, like further on up the road was the first song that really, his version of it was the first song that really was like, I don't know what that is, but I want in. And then my father was like, oh, if you like that, then check this out. Then he put on some Jimi Hendrix, and then he put on some Cream, and then he put on Mountain. Yeah. Theme from an imaginary Western. I was like, that's the power chords in there. I was now we're talking,
And the vocal too was so stunning, right?
Yeah.
That was Felix singing, but then you heard Leslie's voice too, and I think you're somewhere in between those two guys.
I'm higher than Leslie, but I still, exactly. Yeah. But then, like everybody in 1982, early 83, I would have been 6 years old. This guy from Texas shows up with a record called Texas Flood. And you're like, Stevie Ray. And this is some real geeky stuff for you. If you look closely at the cover of Texas Flood, it looks like he's playing a black maple neck Fender Stratocaster. It's kind of a
drawing, right? It's a drawing.
It's a drawing of a picture.
Yeah.
That's actually the guitar he's holding was a Tokai springy sound.
There you go.
And I asked Reese Winans, who's in my band, and I said, is this a Tokai? He goes, Stevie was endorsed by Tokai, and then Fender was so embarrassed that this new star of the guitar was endorsed briefly by Tokai in Japan. Yeah. They're like, no. So the original prints of that record, you could make out the T, which looked like the spaghetti logo, but it's definitely a Tokai springy sound. The later printing looks more like an F, where they kind of went in and doctored it. So, and then when you heard Texas Flood and you heard that sound that was coming, the guitar was so big and his ideas were so endless that you just couldn't help but I was hopelessly addicted by age.
It was flowing, right? It was flowing amazingly, and the vocal too. I mean, it's funny because I'll tell this story to you because you'll understand this. Though I was very much a Jimmy Vaughan head. The Thunderbirds were like a gang that looked so dangerous and so cool, and Jimmy had this thing going with the rhythm and the lead that was interchangeable, and he was so cool. And Steve, and I saw them many times. And Stevie would come, and he'd be standing by the side of the stage. And I'd turn to my friends and we'd say to each other, oh, not the Hendrix kid again.
Right.
Because Stevie was unknown, and he'd come up and he was playing all that stuff, but we were such, like purists. We were like, oh, that's too nuts, But then the fact is, Stevie was the one that actually moved the blues further ahead, because the Thunderbirds were really playing in the past. What they were doing was being true to an idiom from the 50s and 60s. Stevie was damning all that and just moving ahead. It was all of that was there too. So I mean, you find with yourself, right? Your influences start a little later than mine, but you went backwards a bit, didn't you?
Well, the British taught me where to find the blues, and then I had to go find it.
Yeah.
The Mail record with Clapton, the Mail record with Mick Taylor, Mail record with Peter Green. I mean, those 3 records, the Jeff Beck group, Truth record, the first Zeppelin record. I didn't know who Howlin' Wolf was. I knew, I knew Ain't Superstitious. I thought it was a Jeff Beck song. You know what I mean? Because it was on the first record.
Yeah.
And they were the host and the conduit to the masters that I then went back and rediscovered. But to your point, like when you listen to early Jimmy Vaughn and the Thunderbirds, you hear T-Bone, you hear Elmore James, and all those.
And you get Lazy Lester and Guitar Gabriel, these swamp guys from Excello, which and Keith Ferguson, the bass player, was the one who knew all those weird records, and that's what made the Thunderbirds so hip. They weren't playing. Hey, the blues is all right.
They were treading on the old paths, but they were not well worn at that time.
Not at that time, but Stevie did move it the way those English guys did. We go back and we look at the original records, and sometimes we have to admit, I still prefer that English version I heard first. Because that's when you're a kid and you're learning things at first. That's the thing that sticks in your heart the most.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the internet gangs will gang up on you and say, "Well, you're not really the blues." I'm like, listen, it's all about It's like I was introduced to peanut butter and jelly and ramen noodles when I moved to New York because that's all I can afford. Still one of my favorite lunches.
Of course. Well, there you go.
That's a Michelin star, but it's what I know. I still like it.
While we're in this, I want to mention that I'm like an uncle. I feel like to you. I'm proud.
You are definitely an uncle.
I'm very proud of what you're doing, what you've done to this point, and the fact that you and you can let me shine you up a little bit right now. Okay, you can take this. I know you can. You might be turning red, but you've taken a turn in the last 2 years. To start that label, Keeping the Blues Alive. To help, not only help, but to actually introduce people who are your fans to the people that you were fans of, that a lot of people haven't heard of. And I think you did this with Eric Gales. You did this with Joanna Connor. You did this with Dion. You helped me with our project, which is to, the phoning it in. And you also now are doing it with Larry McCray, right? I mean, how did that happen already, or?
We are starting that in September. The whole Keeping the Blues Alive label started with Dion. Yeah. And Dion is a international treasure, as we all know. Okay. Yeah. And he happens to be neighbors with my manager.
Right.
In Florida.
They're Boca Cats.
Yeah. And the thing is with Dion is you don't realize I think he just turned 82 years old.
Yeah, he did.
He is the youngest 82-year-old man you'll ever meet. Yeah. He loves music more than anybody and still sings like he did 50 years ago, 60 years ago. But you also, when you're hanging with him and speaking to him, you also go, this guy was at the Surf Ballroom the night Buddy Holly and Richie Valens played their last show. And also, not only that, but sang and wrote standards, not just hits, standards.
Yeah.
The Wanderer, Run Around Soup. These are standards. And we basically put out his blues record on Keeping the Blues Alive. And then we did the second release was Reese Winans and Friends. And that was my first full production. And then we did, then it was just, okay, who do we know that I know, but it's because of the way the business is set up, even the blues business are seemingly forgotten or ill-served by the business.
Yeah.
Joanna Connor.
Yeah. Oh my God, that record's
powerhouse.
Too.
Yeah. Powerhouse. And she just needed someone to kind of like go, here's what we're going to do. Here's the plan. I did a record for Joanne Shaw Taylor. We did a blues record. And we did our thing, the Blue Quarantinos, which I love the name. And so over the last couple of years, we've kind of gotten these releases going. I did a production for Mascot for Eric Gales, and I have a criteria to get involved with a record, because I don't want to just be there for an Instagram photo, and I don't want to just be there because I'm just there. If I'm going to do something and spend the time and put the love and the care, I want to move the needle. And all of the artists that we've worked with have allowed me to come in and be like, okay, here's where I think we can better the records that you've done in the past. And we're not going to stop until this is the best thing you've put out in 20 years. And a lot of credit goes to my friend Josh Smith, who co-produces these things with.
Oh yeah, and who's a monster in his own right.
Who's a monster in his own right, but also we sit there and sometimes we just shake our head and going, why hasn't anybody done this before? Why isn't anybody put the time and the work and the care?
Well, let me give you my take on that. You're giving them the time and the care, two things that don't exist when they have to either pay for it themselves,
right,
or get it from some Shylock that they're never going to be able to pay back.
Right.
Or some record label that's never going to promote it. And they say, you have 2 days to make this whole record, or 1 day to make this whole record. So, the care is left at the wayside. And part of it is the misconception that the blues just happens, And we know better when we hear Howlin' Wolf take 64,
right.
We used to think, these guys just went in and they smoked this stuff. No, anything done right takes a little time to do it. And you guys are taking the time.
Yeah, if you heard, one of the most nonchalant sounding records that I know is Jeff Beck Truth. Okay, It sounds like they just rolled in, slightly pissed off and probably a little bit, inebriated, hungover, and just cut it. Well, that's what I thought. That's what I made up in my mind. And then I started hearing the outtakes. Yeah. I'm like, okay, none of that.
No.
None of it, tempos were wrong, or not wrong, but different than the final versions. And you're going, okay, well, Mickey Most did a lot of work to get this to a point where it's, we do records in 5 to 7 days, mostly because the artists that we work with are great artists, great singers. And the band that we bring in are 2 or 3 take people. But I always, like I was telling Joanna Connor, I said, when this record's done? She goes, when? I said, when it's great. That's it. That's it's, we need another day. We're going to take another day, because why just go, well, we got $8,000 to make a record. We've run through the studio budget, and I guess this is we'll just finish it on our iPad. It's like, we're not going to do that, because I come from that school where it doesn't have to be expensive to sound expensive. It just needs to take the time and the work and the pre-production, which costs nothing, to sit at home and work on the tunes. And when you go in and have your songs together, then the stuff just kind of goes down pretty easily.
Oh, you're finding the artists are a lot more satisfied than when, or less, or a little bit less apprehensive than when you first talk to them?
It depends. It depends on the artist. Okay. There's always a bit of apprehension. My bedside manner behind the glass is a little bit direct, because I have a vision of what I want it to sound like. And where I really spend the time and get the artist to do the work is in the vocals, because some of the artists we work with are just naturally great singers. Some of these artists are great singers and didn't know it. And that's where I like to take the time and do the work. Now, whether they realize that what they signed up for is another story. Yeah. But I always say, let's suffer now. And then a year from now, you'll go, oh my God. And when everybody goes, wow, I didn't know you could sing like that. It's like, yeah, you can.
You know, though, that's exactly what Leonard Chess did. And we've heard the outtakes with Muddy, with Sonny Boy, with Wolf. He pushed them because the natural inclination when you're that natural at doing something is just sort of throw it off. Oh, I can do this. But then when somebody points to you and says, okay, now let's go for really good, that's, there's a funny story where Paul McCartney went in to sing on a Brian Wilson track. Nobody's ever told Paul, that's not great. So he sang and he said, okay, I'm done then. And Brian said, no, you're not. Get back in there. That wasn't even close to what you're capable of. So, you have to be confrontational a bit sometimes, even on the highest level, you're more lazy, the more natural it is,
It brings me no joy. And so Josh and I have our roles, okay? Josh is more of a real record producer. He's listening to making sure the kick drum is in phase. Yeah. Okay, I could care less. I don't know. It sounds boom back to me. Yeah. It sounds like a drum. So he produces in a way that is more skilled and a producer. Yeah. I am the antagonist. I am the one who goes, all right, I have to go out there and be like, yeah, this is great. It's, you want me to come out and do it? Yeah.
Well, you have to push him, push it.
It brings me no joy, but I also learned from guys like Tom Dowd and Kevin Shirley, especially Kevin Shirley.
Oh, Kevin, yeah.
And we've had many conversations about that in terms of myself. When we'll get out, he'll push me in the studio to sing something, and it'll take me right to the limits, and I get frustrated. And at the end, we'll go to dinner and it'll be like, this brings me no joy to do it but you're going to thank me later. And time and time and time again, I've seen it happen 20 times. I listen back and I go, I'm glad he did, because my default was going to be average.
Well, this has happened from everybody from Paul Rogers, everybody we know.
Yeah.
It's happened with a good producer, because it's not just turn on the machine and you've got it. There must be a way to make it even better. Like you said, there's that one, John Simon used to say, can we make that quantum leap to palatability? It's like, yeah, it's good, but can it be great? So, and now, what about Kevin pushes you, right? You must have learned this from somebody.
Very first session, 2005. I worked with Tom Dowd in my early career. We did what I would call a record and a half. We did 5 demos for Epic Sony Music. Then we did a full record. I'd actually like to find where those first demos are. It'd be interesting to listen to those. We did 5 demos, like an EP, and then we did a full record. And then I did a second album, and then I did a second album with a guy named Cliff Magnus, who was a great pop producer, and it was really my last stand on Sony. It was like let's see if we can get him on the radio. Let's see if it, it's like, because at that point everybody was like, you got to really sound like this new guy John Mayer. I'm like, I can't sound like that.
I can't do
it. And it's no disrespect to John, because he's great, but he's got his own lane. I said, I have my own lane, and it is what it is. And we did 1 record with Cliff, and then I did 2 records with Bobby Held in New York at Bobby Nathan. A lot of Bobbies involved.
Bobby Nathan, right?
Bobby Nathan.
I remember Bobby Nathan's joint. Yeah, I used to go in there and record.
Yeah, it was on 7th Avenue and Times Square, and up
that's right.
by the Sbarro, which is still there. That was the. And we did a record called Blues Deluxe, which was 7 days mixed and mastered. Still one of my most popular records. And then Had to Cry Today. And then after Had to Cry Today, my manager and I, well, my manager more than anything, really felt like where I was at in my career was a bit of a plateau, and we weren't going to really break out. We needed a B12 shot in the production.
Is this Roy already?
Roy and I have been together 30 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This year was 30 years. And it was right before my 14th birthday. So I just turned 44.
Yeah. And you were at a turning point in your career.
Yeah. Yeah, right. You know, I've had a lot of points where it's all been on the line. And so anyway, Roy had a mutual friend in Florida, said, why don't you talk to Kevin Shirley? And I'd heard of Kevin's name because he had just got done remixing those Zeppelin records. You know, How the West Was Won. He did Journey, he did Iron Maiden. I go, that's big league, you know, and I was so used to being turned down by everything big league. I was like, he's not going to want to work with me. To my surprise, he was like, oh yeah, because he was looking to move from New York to LA, and he wanted to find, you know, not only services normal clients that made him money, but he was looking as a producer to find a, like, kind of an undiscovered something.
Yeah, a gem.
And we end up at the Palm Studio in Las Vegas in December of 2005, and we make this record called You and Me in 5 days. And the very first time I showed up, I was like, yeah, I could sing a little bit, and we had these songs, and they're mostly songs we were playing live, and we had some live arrangements, so I sang my song. And he's like, no, got to go for the high note. And the weird thing about Kevin is he can't sing at all. I mean, like it's like somebody that musical, being the best musician in the room, cannot sing. Okay, and he doesn't mind me telling him that because he can't, and he should know this. So I just remember, like, well, I can't hit. And he just goes, he hits the button, and he goes, "Don't get lazy." And I was like, okay. So he pushed me to that record.
Yeah.
And when the mixes came out, and our partner label, we just started working with Ed at Mascot over in Holland. I got an email from Mascot from Ed going, I don't know what Kevin did, but this is by far the best thing you've ever done. And I go, there's your sign. It's because he pushed me. He didn't let me just do the default. And I learned from that, and I still learn from that.
That isn't Pat Thrall and Zoe's studio, is it?
It was. Yeah.
It was. Okay, I figured. Yeah.
We were the first to open up the studio at the Palms. We were the first band that track in there. They had a couple of overdub sessions, including Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty well equipped, that place.
And it was basically, you know, when the Hit Factory closed in Midtown.
Yeah.
The proper Hit Factory that was the big
Sure, the Germano's place, yeah.
Yeah. And before, you know, Troy moved down on West Broadway, Pat and Zoe basically were recruited by the Maloofs to build out a world-class Hit Factory-like facility in Las Vegas for this new hotel that was called the Palms. And so we ended up doing like 3 or 4 records there. I missed that place because it seems like an odd situation to record in, being in the third floor of a casino.
Yeah, but it's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
You really are isolated, have nothing. Like, once you put your $20 in the slot machines, you know, and got tired of listening to the endless loop of sugary pop covers that was in the lobby, you had nothing to do but to get down to business.
And I remember Zoe coming down to meet me in the casino to take me upstairs.
Yeah, it was like, great. You know,
what's going? Where is it? Where can this place possibly be? When you go in there, you're like, I must be in the wrong place.
Well, when we recorded the first record, the second tower, which was the second tower they were building, wasn't even completed. I think they had 7 floors done. It was like a shell of a building, and you know, so it was kind of put together, and it's kind of weird because it all seemed to scale really fast.
But that's where Vegas was on the cusp of not being the Vegas we knew. You were right in the middle of it changing to what it is now. It's an Ed Hardy t-shirt wearing community now.
There was definitely a lot of Ed Hardy. Yeah. Affliction jeans. I remember that, like on a Friday night.
Yes. Hey, so you guys finally, at what point do you? I mean, of course you're an artist, a great player, We don't even have to talk about the renowned guitar collection. We don't really need. You and I don't need to get into that because
I blame you though.
You still blame me for that. But all of that though is I always say to people, Joe's not a guitar player. Joe is a guy who figured out that playing guitar could afford him the guitars he wanted. he got really good at both.
Exactly.
He got really good at both. But there's another aspect of this whole business curve of you and Roy, where you decide to own everything. Okay, you've had it with these companies. You had it with CBS, Sony. You've had it with other companies. Where does that conversation begin?
In 2002, pretty much. I'm one of and I love Bruce at Alligator. We've become good friends and really good friends. And I love and respect what he's done. He's passed on a few notable, successful blues artists. Me, to sell 9 million records. Robert Cray and Stevie Ray Vaughan. Now, I'm not putting myself in that category, but I do fall into the category of people he's passed.
I know Bruce very well. He had a certain thing about.
He had certain things he was looking for.
Things. Yeah.
And you know what? I understand this running a business myself. It's like you have a certain vision, a certain thing you're looking for, and if it doesn't quite fit what you're looking for as a label boss, you can't second guess it. You got to just move on. So when Alligator passed, we were kind of left for dead, and we had two choices, and we ended up making this record with Bobby Held with $10,000 of whatever was left of our money. And we put in $10,000 and made the record Blues Deluxe. And we basically, with the help of Roy's brother, who was working for a distribution company in Florida, got the records in stores. But basically, most of them initially were sold out of the back of our van after shows.
Yep, Elvis.
And the thing actually did really well. And we started to see the billings come in, the money come in. And we're like, man, if we were on a label, we never would see this kind of return. So we ended up going, we're not looking for a label. We're just going to keep this going. Subsequently, we moved from Monterey Peninsula to William Morris, and we were being booked, somewhat successfully by William Morris. But we couldn't get out of this kind of club. Joe's just a club act. It's $3,000 for a gig. Set it and forget it. There's the rest of your life. Joe B. Okay. And God forbid you draw one less person the time in. Now it becomes $2,500.
I know it. I know it well.
Different than anybody else.
Yeah.
So we ended up in 2005, right before we met Kevin Shirley, got sick and tired of that behavior. And we four-walled Fort Wayne, Indiana and Jacksonville. And we're for easy math, we drew the same amount of people at the Embassy Theater in Fort Wayne as we would have at Pierre's, the club. The club wanted to give us $6,000 or whatever dollars, and and we ended up making like 25 grand or 28 grand. And that was like the ultimate. Okay. Yeah. And then we ran the same playbook in Jacksonville, went from Freebird Live, which I don't think is there anymore, to the Florida Theater, and made like 18 or 19 grand, selling the exact same amount of tickets as we would have sold, and made $4,000. And there you go. So the vertical integration started there. And we ended up, just as we would make more money doing these shows, we would four-wall more gigs, and finally by the early 2007, we were four-walling all of America and half of Europe and the UK.
I knew because I started seeing billboards with you on them. Yeah. You guys were doing a sort of an old-time marketing thing. This is pre-internet marketing. This is like old school. Buy a billboard, stick Joe up there, and people will think or know this is something important. I got to go see this. It's brilliant in its simplicity. And
even on the sellouts, like the shows that sell out, we still put the billboards up and we leave them in the market a few weeks after the show. It's because it's old school P.T. Barnum.
Sure, you paste the sold out over it. You just paste
exactly, or just leave it up. like out of sight, out of mind, so we ended up doing that, and we ended up scaling our business. And then in 2008, we again, everything was on the line. And 2008, early 2009, you couldn't get a bank loan, but we decided we had gotten this gig at the Albert Hall, was sold out.
Right, that's a big turning point for you. Yeah.
I invited Eric Clapton. He accepted. So we're like, we got to film it. And to film it correctly, to do it on a big scale, was going to be over $250,000. So we didn't have $250,000. We're a small company with 2 employees and 2 idiots with a dream, and a small touring road crew and stuff like that. And we went to Citibank, or one of the banks, and went to get a loan and to do this DVD. And it was really funny, because they came back and says, well, we're not really giving loans out now because of the financial crisis, and they offered us 25 grand. We're like, we're not going to, what
What are you gonna do with that?
So it's not going to move the needle. That's 1/10 of what we needed. So we ended up doing a tour of the UK, and a half successful tour. We did the back half of 2008 into early 2009 in America. We did a lot of 4 walls. We ended up really kind of like nipping and tucking our expenses, and we accrued just a little over $250,000. And we did it Vegas style, and we pushed it all in on one gig.
Yeah.
And it was like it was either like the Albert Hall was the beginning of the beginning or the beginning of the end, because if it didn't work out, it was over.
One roll of the dice, man.
We were virtually bankrupt. So anyway, the DVD comes out, it's released, it's doing okay. Not exactly a juggernaut. Then the PBS affiliate in Albany calls and says, hey, can we run an hour edit? Can you do an hour edit for our pledge drive? Because I'm from upstate New York. And they were like, yeah, local boy plays Albert Hall with Clapton. They run this thing, and they immediately raised 25 grand an hour, which is like, just ring the bell in New York.
Yeah, yeah.
Then they did it again to see if it was a fluke. Then they tested it in some other market. And then all of a sudden, in 2009, early 2010, by the fall of 2009, we had gone from drawing maybe 800 to 1,000 people to selling out the Chicago theater.
Yeah.
All because PBS would run these DVD, the DVD, and it was just when before Netflix, and it was just when the hyper cable subscription business was like 500 channels, and it truncated the influence of network television. So in like LA, ABC is channel 8, PBS is ABC is channel 7, PBS is channel 8. People don't care. They're just flipping through. Next thing you know, they see some idiot with a guitar standing next to Eric Clapton. And they're like, who is this? So the power of national television, the power of PBS, being the fact that I was the most edgy thing on the network. It was like literally the Celtic women reading reruns of Lawrence Welk, Nova, and me. And then maybe Andrea Bocelli,
some other music. Yeah. Well, you know what, Joe? That's such a small window to have gone opened. A window of opportunity, that small window, because within a couple of years of that, everybody's like, "Oh, I'll just watch it on YouTube. It's somebody ripped it and it's free," And now what are your feelings about this music being free, so accessible without paying anything to the artist?
It was funny. I was just reading an article today, and I posted about it, which is usually bad news for me if I have an opinion.
The haters come up, man.
And I read, and it's no fault of her own, probably maybe the fault of her agent and whoever negotiated her deal. Scarlett Johansson suing Disney over the release. Apparently, she had a movie called Black Widow.
Yeah.
And she took the deal based on, now actors, A-list actors will take a reduced salary and they'll take a back end deal based on how the movie performs at you know, in the cinema.
Yeah, Cruise was big on the first starter of this thing.
Yes, and it works out. Okay, two things. Well, okay, maybe they delay the release until everybody can go back to the theaters. But what happened was they really pushed the streaming side of it, and they didn't put the big ad campaign on television or like the traditional model. And I'm reading this article, and it's like she's suing Disney because her of whatever back end she was going to get, she doesn't participate in any of the streaming. And I go, welcome to the music business, guys.
Well, she should be firing her lawyers, not suing Disney. You know what, though? It's so hard. The new language is so hard to.
It's also about reading the play action and memo to Hollywood. Any actor, actress, anybody's in. It's like that's coming. We got beat down for the last 10 years.
Yeah, music was,
But what's happening now with movies, especially during the pandemic, when you have all the AMC, everybody was shut down. Nobody's going to theaters anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, it's all Netflix streaming based, and the ancillary revenue that was generated by selling hard tickets is gone.
Yeah.
So with music, the way to do it is to create a vertically integrated business where there's one mothership, you the artist, and you participate 100% in everything that floats around it. Your merchandise, your touring, you know, even streaming. If you own enough catalog, it'll actually accrue some money, believe it or not. And anything endorsements, you know, NFTs, or you know, I don't know when this is going to air, but we either.
Well, I wanted to talk about that, your NFT. You know, after we get through this, we'll go to there. Yeah.
So basically, if you're a musician, you need to figure out how to monetize nothing, and your art is the widget to open the door. You know, we give away so much music, but it opens the door to other things. It opens the doors to selling tickets. It opens the doors to so many different avenues of revenue.
Well, Bill Graham was way ahead of this with T-shirts, with merch. You know, merch is, you know, bands get like, man, never mind, bands are getting a piece of the merch. You know, instead of a lot of front end bread. It's almost the same thing, the back end on a movie deal. Well, the merch is a band's way in, you know, to make a lot of money.